Welcome, everybody, to Getting to the Root of Modern Dis-ease. In this self-empowering summit, we will envision a new paradigm for healing based on wholeness, tapping into foundational wisdom, both ancient and modern, to create the conditions that favor deep and lasting healing of body, mind, and spirit. Step out of the box with me and our panel of healers as we open a deep and transformative conversation that gets to the very root of modern dis-ease and allows access to the healing powers that are your birthright. I'm Gina Sager, and I'm your host for this event. And today I am beyond thrilled to welcome one of my teachers, Swami Karma Karuna Saraswati. Thank you so much, Swami Karma Karuna, for being with us.
Thank you so much, Gina. It's really wonderful to reconnect in this space and be able to share something of depth and very important for this time in history. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So let me just take a moment to tell everyone who you are. So Swami Karma Karuna Saraswati is an engaging, intuitive yoga and meditation teacher, an inspirational speaker, a writer, and an IAYT certified yoga therapist with more than 25 years of experience. She's been trained in the Bihar Yoga traditional system and visits India yearly to further her yogic learning and practice selfless service. Swami Karma Karuna is a co-founder and director of Anahata Yoga Retreat in New Zealand and also travels throughout the world, leading workshops, training yoga teachers, presenting at international events, guiding spiritual sadhana retreats, and offering therapeutic one-to-one yoga sessions. She is passionate about sharing an authentic and down-to-earth approach, weaving together the ancient practices with a touch of psychology and brain science, aimed at motivating people to live their yoga here and now. So I am the very grateful recipient, as I said, of many of her teachings. And without you, Swami Karma Karuna, I never would have understood or known about Yoga Nidra. So I thank you from my heart. And I'm delighted that you're here to talk to us now about the healing science of Yoga Nidra. But before we get directly into the healing science of Yoga Nidra, I wonder if you would just share some thoughts about what, in your opinion, seem to be the roots of the diseases that we seem to be suffering in our modern age.
I think one of the most important things that we need to look deeply at is stress. Actually, when we look at stress and the different ways that that manifests in our life, whether it's environmental, whether it's our own perceptions of experiences in life, whether it's the food we eat, whether moving around too much, we travel so much more than our ancestors did. All of these things put a lot of stress on the body and mind. And if we start to look into stress, or we start to look into disease, so many of the imbalances that we're facing have roots in stress. And if we think just, for example, back to our ancestors, when they had stress, they were running from a lion. They were fighting another tribe. They were trying to survive something like, a famine. We have stress because our emails box is too full. We get stressed because we get to work and we're cranky with our boss for some reason, worried about our children. Maybe the bank balance has gone a bit lower than normal. And these types of things are creating the same physiological experience in our body as running from the lion. Even a cup of caffeine, sorry for the coffee drinkers out there, even a cup of caffeine tells the body the same message as running from the lion. And so these types of roots are actually having a profound influence on every aspect of our body and mind. When we have stressors, or we have a stress response, the fight and flight response, it begins to create a shift in our breath, for example, which then has a whole influence, a whole another level of influence. Our heart rate goes up. All the energy goes to the muscles to help us run from the lion, but that then has an influence on our digestive system, our reproductive system, and so on and so forth. And so we're really in a challenge just at that level, because so often our breath is too fast. So often our reproductive system, our digestive system is being downgraded, because of course when you're running from the lion, you're not going to reproduce, you're not going to take time to digest. But if that's happening on a daily basis or several times a day, and if we're really honest with ourselves, it is that, and it's become the new normal, that then creates a whole host of other challenges. And much of our stress is actually the roots of how we perceive things in life, which is where Yoga Nidra can help us to get to the roots of that. And I'll come to that a little bit later. And I just want to mention also long-term stress effects. So when we have this fight and flight going on day after day, many times a day, and remember, it should only be when we're running from the lion, or we have to move a car off of, somebody we love, or get out of the way of the bus. So that it's important to help us stay safe, but it's not something we should be having each and every day so many times. But when we do have that, like most of us, long term, then we have other imbalances, particularly in the cortisol. And that influences, for example, inflammation in the body. So things like arthritis, our ability to sleep, so insomnia, our sugar levels, diabetes. So many of the challenges that we have, our heart rate, that again, high blood pressure, these types of things, they have roots back into stress. Of course, we have to understand that stress takes many forms, and it can be that we have deep roots of trauma, which give us glasses by which we view the world. So there's fear in front of the different experiences of life. We also need to think about, as I already said, what the inputs are. So the fast pace of life, the different demands on our nervous systems, like our cell phones, which are so very useful, but they also are creating a constant movement, a constant stimulation to the nervous system, all the different inputs that we have to deal with. So if we think about everything that our eyes, our ears, our hands, our mouth, our nose, all those sense experiences on a daily basis has to kind of process. No wonder we're using so much of our vitality just to live and become depleted. So I think one of the most important key factors actually is dealing with the deep-rooted stress. First, of course, we have to start at the basic level, so the physical stress, but we have to look at the roots of that, because much of it is how we perceive the experiences in life, how we perceive ourselves. I think also not having enough time for ourselves in this day and age is one of the really big roots of disease. We're out of touch with our deeper voice, because the senses are taking us here and there, and we're constantly on that rat wheel, you could say, and that takes us out from being able to listen to our own inner voice, to listen to the voice of our own body, to listen to the deeper nature, to be able to pause, put the pause button on and actually really tune in. And when we do that, actually we know we have the answers inside. When we do that, our body wisdom speaks. Our deeper mind gives us the message, but we can't hear it when we're so busy, when we haven't had enough time to pause. So there's so many other layers too, but I think if we can start to deal with that stress root at all the different levels, that can be an incredible support to our healing process. And I think this is why Yoga Nidra is so important, and why I want to share about that today, because that it addresses the different levels of stress: physical, mental, energetic, and the root of it, the core unconscious or subconscious pattern, which often causes it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and so I think you're pointing out something that is really valid, and that is that we get sort of confused when we talk about stress, and we think that stress is that thing that's happening to us, and
Yes.
forget that stress is actually our response to that thing. And that's really a mind flip, I think, for those of us in the Western world. We're so used to just blaming and complaining. It doesn't occur to us that it could be the way that we're seeing the world. So this is really, really important. And, giving your senses time to rest is, again, something that most of us don't know how to do.
And if we don't give our senses time to rest, and we don't take that space or use the practices to bring us into the relax and digest experience, then the fight and flight is meant for survival. And when we're in that survival instinct, then there's no room for anything else. So we don't make as good of decisions. We don't, our relationships are impacted. The way, again, the glasses that we're viewing the world with are viewed in a different way, out of survival rather than out of a point of feeling grounded and connected, and then making decisions or having conversations or being engaged in life from a conscious point of view. The unconscious part of ourself is what runs the fight and flight. Yeah, so that's, and from a yogic perspective, everything we do is aiming to bring us more and more into consciousness, presence, here and now. Yeah, but the fight and flight keeps us in the future, worried about what could happen, or the past is influencing that. And so past experiences lock us or block us in such a way that we're unable to see clearly.
Wow. So this is one of the many reasons that I believe that the practice of Yoga Nidra can save the world.
Totally agree.
Yeah. I want you to tell everybody about it. I do just want to say that when I did this practice for the first time in my yoga teacher training 15 years or so ago, I remember being astonished. I'm like, what was that? Mm-hmm. And it was honestly the very first time in my life that I could remember that I ever felt fully embodied and relaxed. And so please tell us, what in the world is Yoga Nidra, and how does it help us with all of these things? How does it help us manage stress?
I think Yoga Nidra is, you could say it's the water in the desert of our modern world. in that level of being able to really support and nourish us and bring us into that relaxation response, as well as have a whole host of different deeper results. So Yoga Nidra translates from two words: yoga, meaning union, often I think of it as presence, and then nidra is sleep. So normally when we sleep, we go into an unconscious state, and we might be there for 8 or so hours, and we come out hopefully rested, although in this day and age, often we're not rested when we finish our sleep. And so Yoga Nidra is a form of, you could say, yogic sleep or psychic sleep, which allows us to access all the benefits of sleep, which is nourishment, being able to heal, being able to let go of the different experiences we've had that might be sitting in the subconscious mind. So normal deep sleep allows for this process. And Yoga Nidra is a conscious way of doing this, where rather than going into that sleep state where we don't remember anything, we actually access the same layers of ourselves whilst being awake, you could say, but in a deeply relaxed state. At the basic level, you could say Yoga Nidra is a relaxation technique, but ultimately it leads us to a state of experience, which can be expressed in the same terms as enlightenment or nirvana or realization. So the ultimate aim of Yoga Nidra is actually a much higher experience. And when we look at Yoga Nidra from the historical context, you'll find it mentioned in the ancient texts as a state of experience. But what we mainly are experiencing in the Western world, and even in India these days, is rather a technique, the technique of Yoga Nidra, which systematically leads us through different stages, bringing us into a state of relaxation. And each of the stages has a particular, you could say, influence on the body, mind, prana, and also thus the healing, the ability to come into health and well-being. So maybe a good way to share this with you is to look at the different stages of Yoga Nidra, if you're interested. Yes, and yes. that will give you give the listeners a really good overview of how each of the stages works in brief. So we begin with the internalization, and that is like any practice. You set yourself up for going into a different state of experience. And in Yoga Nidra, we are starting to turn off our senses. So I've been speaking about how our senses are overactivated. And with Yoga Nidra, the first stage is we give attention to the senses so that they come into a state of, once they've been stimulated, they naturally start to turn in. You could say, like a child, if you tell the child, don't go and do that, the child wants to go and do that. But if you kind of say, okay, you can go do it within this realm, then after a while they get bored. So that's the same as the senses. If we say to the senses, hear that, feel that, experience this, then after a while they naturally turn in and in a process of saturation. And then we can start to access other parts of who we are. So from a yogic perspective, we're not just this physical body, but we have the physical body, the mental body, the energy body, and the more subtle layers, you could say. And so the first stage of Yoga Nidra is setting ourselves up, getting our moving away from all that stimulation and starting to internalize. And then we come into a very important stage called Sanculpa. And this is the Bihar School of Yoga method that I'm sharing with you and speaking about today. And Sanculpa is, from a healing perspective, a very important aspect of Yoga Nidra. The experience externally is, the majority of that is based on our subconscious layer. And Bruce Lipton speaks about this, who is a wonderful scientist. And he speaks about how 95% of our external experience is actually based on the internal. So everything we do in our day-to-day life is based on that subconscious layer. And the majority of that is actually formed already by the time we're 8. Yeah. So whatever we've experienced from 0 to 8, and of course we have brain plasticity, so we're able to change that. It doesn't mean that we can't do anything different. It doesn't mean that we're determined for life from those experiences, but it does mean that a lot of the way we view the world, the things we react to, the experiences that we find difficult or beautiful or engage us or we repel, those experiences have roots in the subconscious layers of the mind, which are formed at that very early age. And so the part of Yoga Nidra, the Sanculpa, which translates as every experience in existence, is a way that we can start to put something into our own deep mind. And I like to think of it as advertising to ourselves. So the advertising agencies make billions of dollars because of their methods of speaking to our unconscious mind, and they do that with a symbol, or they do it with a short statement. If I ask you something like, who is Just Do It related to? Yeah. Who is it? Nike. Of course. So everywhere around the world that I go, if I say Just Do It, everybody knows that that's Nike. And that's the same thing that we want to do to ourselves, is be able to impress our deep mind, our subconscious and unconscious layers with whatever is important to us, so that we can, because if we think back to what I just said, that 95% of our day-to-day active kind of conscious experience or experience in the external world is based on the internal, is based on the subconscious layer, then we need to get some material into the subconscious layer that we want to be there. So this is where Sanculpa is planting that seed and being able to then water that with constant use, and we begin to then shift our perspective in front of life. And as we spoke about in relation to stress, so much of what we react to in life, so much of what we're challenged with in life, is because we're perceiving it in a particular way. I mean, if I go into the room, I'm going to perceive it in one way, and if you go into the room, you perceive it in another way. And that's based on our subconscious and unconscious layers, which have been mainly formed from 0 to 8. And so then we're reacting in our day-to-day life, not based on what's actually here, not what's based, not the experience in this moment, but on those deep-rooted conditioning. Yeah, deep-rooted, we call it samskaras in yoga, as you'll know. And so the Sanculpa is an incredibly important part of being able to transform our vision, our experience, the way we look at life, and be able to also really direct what it is we want to experience in life. So that's the second stage of Yoga Nidra. Is there any questions? Are you with me so far?
So I would like to just ask a question about the Sanculpa. I know a lot of times folks say, how do I know what to do? I mean, honestly, my personal experience and the experience that I've had with some of my students is that we don't know who we are. We don't know what would be best for us. It's just like, that's how out of touch I have lived much of my life.
Yes.
Like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I need to be me. I don't know. So how do I know? How do I get to that place of knowing?
Yeah. No,
I know you know. Please tell us.
Well, I think it's a process, and it's different for everybody. And I often think of it as like we can have what I call maybe a short-term Sankalpa, which is more like a stepping stone to kind of the essence of Sankalpa. Once we get the Sankalpa, like Nike's Just Do It, we want to keep it. We want it to be the same so that it really imprints and impresses our deep mind. So I often hear people saying, oh, my Sankalpa today is this, or my Sankalpa is that. But actually, Sankalpa is much deeper than that. It's a life purpose. It's something that, as you rightly point to, is very much an inner experience. And how do we know that when we're so out of touch with ourselves? So I think the first stage is maybe picking something that's a bit smaller that we can somehow see that it would help our life. And it's very important that Sankalpa is in the positive language and that it's short and memorable. And we can put vision to that. We can put a symbol with it. We can put a color even with it. It can be the words, but once we get it, we keep it the same. And there may be a point where we then get more understanding, and that's where the longer Sankalpa can come. One way to kind of work with ourselves that I find helpful is using the Swan Technique, which Swami Niranjan, my inspirer, has kind of brought through. And it's much like the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that one will find in the business world. But the SWAN translates as strengths, weaknesses, aims, or ambitions, and needs. And you can kind of divide a paper in four and do a brainstorm of strengths on one corner, weaknesses, aims, needs. And really that's a way to start to self-reflect, understand ourselves in a different level and see, okay, well, what's helping me in life? We all have strengths that support us, move us forward. We also all have areas of weakness that block us, or might be physical, might be mental, might be energetic, but there's areas of experience which block us, stop us from moving forward. And if we can identify those, then that might form part of our Sankalpa. What are my aims in life? And not the aims that society gave me, not the aims that my parents gave me, but what are my true aims? And that's hard to find because, as you've said, where do we find that inner experience? And in a way, we have to take away all the other layers so that we can start to associate with that true inner experience and the inner aim. So that might take time. Yeah. And needs, like what do I really need to be healthy and happy and feel supported? And of course we have our basic instinctual needs. We need, at least in New Zealand, you need a roof over your head because it's cold, and you need clothes or else you're going to get arrested, so different needs are there, but the basic instinctual needs are very much common in humans. And then there's other needs that we need to think about. So for me, for example, my Sangha, my spiritual family is very important. And I consider that as part of my need. So when we're starting to look deeply at our Sankalpa, this is one method I think that can help us to start to self-reflect and understand ourselves from a different perspective, and maybe help to at least do a short-term Sankalpa. And then my experience is the long-term Sankalpa, or my actual Sankalpa, it just appeared. Like I tried a few different ones and they didn't quite work. They didn't quite resonate. And then when I really felt my Sankalpa, it was like I couldn't say anything else. It just was there. And then after about 10 years, when I had a very strong life change, it shifted itself. I didn't try to shift it, but it was like one day I laid down for Yoga Nidra, and that day something else came, and my old one was gone. And that's now been with me for another many years. So that's been my experience with Sanculpa, but many people find the Swan technique very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember that you told us when we were working together that you may very well have one Sanculpa for your entire life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, ultimately that's kind of the aim. It's your deeper life purpose, but of course we might have stepping stones on the way to get to that, because as you said, we're so out of touch with ourselves that it takes time to start to reorient to who we really are.
Yes, and that's just another beautiful thing about Yoga Nidra. It helps us to reorient.
Yeah, it's such a powerful practice on every single level.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell us more levels.
Yeah, so from Sanculpa, we move on to the body rotation. And the body rotation is very important because it continues to establish this withdrawal from the senses. And those people who are yoga oriented, that's called pratyahara. So we're withdrawing from all the external stimuli. We're working in a way through the body to also relax the mind. So as we move the awareness from right hand thumb, index finger, influence the brain called the homunculus man, which they call the little man in the brain. And I wish I had a little diagram to show you. If you look in Anatomy and Physiology book, you'll find him there. And he's got these really big hands and huge face, big feet, and that represents the areas in our body where we have the most sense endings. And they get stimulated and send a message to that area of the brain. So when we consciously do that, we start to open up that nerve pathway, have a better flow, and we start to influence a relaxation response at that deeper level within the brain. So it's pretty incredible, actually, that these ancient yogis somehow managed to have some understanding of science, and now science is finally starting to prove some of these things. So we're basically helping to create a deep relaxation at the body level, the mind level, and also the pranic, the energy level, that the energy can flow better. Because what else are we but energy, electricity? When the nerve impulse is being sent from the hand to the brain, it's actually an electrical impulse. So that begins to flow better. And I find that the body rotation is where people finally start to let go. I don't know if you have that experience in your teaching as well, but often that's when people start to sleep, and because they're finally starting to relax. And we're not used to being in that in-between state of kind of still externally aware and internally aware simultaneously. And so often that's the point where we lose consciousness. But our aim in Yoga Nidra, of course, is different, that we still remain conscious and alert. But that doesn't always happen, and that's okay if it doesn't. Probably you need the sleep. That's how I look at it. So very important, the body rotation, and I would say it's one of the signature stages. If we don't have a body rotation in the Yoga Nidra, it's not a Yoga Nidra. So just to clarify, laying on the floor for 2 minutes after your yoga class, that's not Yoga Nidra. Yeah, spraying lavender on your face in Shavasana, that's not Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra needs to have a certain amount, the certain stages, and each of the stages has a really important influence on the different areas of who we are. And Shavasana in any form is good, so laying on your back and relaxing in any form is good, but Yoga Nidra brings us to a whole different level. And it's not something that one should just go and kind of learn in a weekend course, because we're working with the deep mind. We're working with different areas of our experience that we're not conscious of. And it really needs a proper training and an in-depth personal experience, in the same way that in olden times, you could say, the different practices weren't just given in a book. They weren't given in a weekend seminar. They were given in a lifetime of dedication between a guru and a disciple. And I think that's really important to remember. This is a very deep and powerful practice that we should really honor. So body rotation is one of those essential stages that makes it different from a normal relaxation, you could say. Yeah. So the next stage is the breath, and the breath is very important also. They're all important. I'll keep saying that. And the thing about the breath to keep in mind is it is the only physiological experience that we have both the capacity to, it happens unconsciously all the time. So we're still breathing, even though we're not thinking about the breath right now. So the primitive brain is running that part of our breath. And thank goodness, or else we'd all be dead. Because if we had to remember to breathe, well, we'd be long gone. So that's a really good thing. But the amazing thing about the breath is that it also is something that we have the capacity to control. And when we're aware of the breath, simply just being aware, not actually actively doing anything, or we're actively controlling the breath, it's actually the frontal lobe of the brain that is driving it, you could say, and activate it. And so the breath is very special, and thus why you see it in so many of the yogic practices, because it gives us, in a way, access to parts of ourselves that we don't normally have access to. It gives us the ability, for example, to turn on the relaxation response. And some of the material that I've been reading talks about one of the only way that we can consciously turn on the relaxation response is through diaphragmatic breathing or yogic breathing. Yeah, so that's now being, nutritionists and different people are speaking about the importance of the breath, not just even for, being conscious, but for our gut health, for example.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's highly important. And in Yoga Nidra, we're observing the breath and that part of the practice. So we're aware of it, but it's kind of a passive awareness also. And it allows us to turn on these functions that I'm speaking about, so the frontal lobe. It allows us also to start to free up the pranic, or the energy body. So blocks in the energy body can be released through conscious breath. And so those are part of the influences, you could say, of the breath. And it also really brings us deeper. So again, we're coming more and more to that inner self and being able to connect to deeper parts of ourselves, but we're still conscious. We're not sleeping. Yeah, and that's the difference between normal sleep and Yoga Nidra. Normal sleep, by that point, you'd be long gone, and there's no awareness. But in Yoga Nidra, there's awareness. So as we move into the next stages, and our roots, the deep-rooted material, the conditioning can arise, we're aware and present and relaxed, so we can look at it with a different point of view. That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Any questions so far?
Well, I often say to people that, if we're once we reach this state of relaxation, then I talk about opening the doors of the subconscious mind, like you're looking into a basement.
Exactly.
And once we reach that place of integration and balance, then we have the capacity, potentially for the first time, to look in without being reactive, because
Exactly.
everything is in alignment. The hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis and everything comes into alignment. And from that place, that's when the deeper work actually starts to happen, because otherwise we don't go to that place. And somebody says this and I go, no, I'm not going to go there. And I'm controlling how much access I have to my inner world. And here I'm relaxed enough that whatever happens is fine.
That's right.
And that's an amazing place to be.
Well, it is, because that's the roots, as we spoke about. If our conscious life is based on the unconscious realm, if we can't get to that, how are we going to pull out those weeds, so to speak? Yes. So, the things that are causing the disharmony, the attitudes we have, that maybe some trauma, some desires that somehow or another we have, or we've been told to have, all of that is within the deeper mind. And so also is the most beautiful parts of ourselves, the creativity, the parts of ourselves that we have yet unexplored, because I think I can't do that. I think I can't sing. I think somehow I've been blocked through maybe a childhood experience. And so that part of me is locked up. So if we can reach that unconscious and subconscious layer, there's ultimate ability to expand and express ourselves in a much more powerful way. And then also we have the capacity to keep on drawing out those weeds that no longer serve us. And it's incredibly empowering practice and an ability. And like you said, we're unable to access this in many other ways. Of course, if we go into different meditation states, because Yoga Nidra is a type of meditation actually, so it can be accessed in meditation state as well. But you know, for many people, they're not getting into that deep state yet. So it's still kind of like the surface level of the mind moving when they try to meditate. So this allows us somehow a very powerful access to that unconscious layer. Yeah.
And again, I need to say, because of so much trauma in the world, I think it's so important. Like, this is particularly important to me because you're guided to this place where it then becomes safe. And again, most of us don't know how to look at our triggers from that place. So this is, to me, it's teaching the body too, that it's safe to stay open when these things start to come up.
Very much, because you're actually training yourself in the relaxation response. So I would say the majority of people, you know, they might say they're relaxed when they're drinking their glass of wine or reading their newspaper, but are they actually physiologically relaxed? And so in the practice of yoga, wiring our body and mind to know what it feels like to be relaxed. And it's only in that, when we're in the fight and flight, how can we deal with the trauma? We're trying to survive. So it's only from that point of relaxation that we can actually start to look at those roots. And it's highly important, or else they're determining our experience. You know, they're giving us the glasses by which we're viewing the world. And often those glasses are dirty. Yeah, they're not giving us perspective.
We've gotten out of a box somewhere. They're not even close to ours. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. So, and I think the next stages of Yoga Nidra where we really start to deal with that ability to reach the trauma, or reach also the creative parts of ourselves. So I don't want to only think of it from a negative perspective. As I said, there's so much wealth within us that we're not yet accessing. And when we get to the next stage, which is the opposites, we're starting to, you know, the opposites in life are the experiences that often throw us out of balance, you could say. It's too hot, it's too cold, I like, I dislike, I want, I don't want. And we get attached to different experiences. And when we go into working with the opposites, one thing that happens is we start to be in a relaxed state of experience whilst going into opposite emotions, opposite, you know, heat and cold, heavy, light, all these different experiences. So they become less grasping or less condensing of our experience in life. Because if you can flow in between the experiences without getting attached or without getting so influenced, it gives you a freedom. Yeah. So one part of the opposites is getting that experience of freedom. The other thing to keep in mind is that the hypothalamus is basically running a lot of the unconscious drives. So emotional drives, hunger, thirst, sex, different experiences like that. And when we're working with the opposites, again, we're consciously in this state, we're in a state of relaxation, we're observing, we're witnessing, and that's a really important part of Yoga Nidra. And again, why I say that people need to have proper training within themselves before teaching this, and give proper training to their students, because if we don't have that witnessing aspect activated, then we're going to get caught up in the material. So it's really important to be the witness, to be able to step back and observe it as an unaffected, witness, rather than jumping into the movie and kind of feeding it, if you like. And so in that point of view, we're witnessing experiences that are being driven unconsciously for survival, so survival instincts. And we're able to kind of see, okay, hot, cold, this, fear, rage, love, all these different experiences we see from an objective experience. And so that attachment, or that, again, the fear drive that is often what we're reacting from when we're in the fight and flight, we start to, again, retrain the brain in front of it, rewire ourselves so that those things that are often influencing us, they're no longer influencing us in the same way. So it's very empowering, again, this opposites experience.
So
yeah.
May I ask a question? I teach mindfulness and do some of the neuroscientific explanation. I try not to go too far into the geeky stuff, but I always am thinking at this point in Yoga Nidra, the way I look at it is that most of our lives are spent in the left brain, which is judgmental and critical and doesn't allow the paradox. But the right side of the brain actually is quite comfortable with the paradox. It can hold two things without freaking out. So and correct me if I'm wrong, this is just the way I see it, is it possible that what we're doing is we're normally living in this tiny little part of our left brain, and now we're opening ourselves? Dan Siegel talks about the fact that we have 100 billion neurons, and each one has 10,000 connections that are possible. So I sort of imagine that by this time in the process, we've opened up all of those neural pathways, and they're just sort of sitting there sparkling with all of the possibility, who knows which thing is going to happen next. And so it feels to me like it's opening access to the entirety of the brain and connecting then right and left hemispheres in a new way. That to me feels like that's what the paradox is. I'm used to only living over here, and now I have the capacity to take information from over here. It doesn't make me lose my cognitive ability. It gives me more. It opens me to all of the possibility in the world. Is that anywhere close?
I think that's true. I mean, I would say that different people are more left or right brain oriented. And what happens is that because you're kind of switching between the two experiences, which are often left or right brain dominant, you then, as you say, you start to connect these, and you start to be able to have a whole experience. And that's one of the purposes of the opposites, is to be able to awaken the whole brain. And that's what we're trying to do from a yogic perspective as well. So I definitely think that there is an aspect of that, for sure. Yeah. So moving on to the opposites, from the opposites to the visualization. Again, another what I would call very much important and transformative stage is we've been speaking a lot about how we have this deep material, the subconscious and unconscious layers. And that's the root, and particularly in relation to kind of healing dis-ease or shifting perspectives, a root of the glasses that we're wearing is held there. And we hold all the different experiences in what we call archetypes. And so, for example, let's say horse. When we have this idea of horse, and that might come up in our visualization, horse running through the field, that might contain a whole bunch of different experiences. So when I think of horse, feeding my apple to my horse, brushing it, sneezing because I was actually allergic to it, falling off of it when I tried to jump, giving my daughter the experience of riding a horse on the beach, all of these types of things, having to shovel the crap because my mom made me. All of these different experiences are contained within the idea of horse for me. So we hold in our deep mind, through imagery, often the experiences of life. So when we're using images in Yoga Nidra, it can unlock, and we don't know when that's going to happen. And another reason why it's so important to really go progressively with Yoga Nidra, use gentle images to start with, and really teachers need to be trained very deeply because we're working with the unconscious mind. But in this case, when we're using the images, we're starting to unlock those layers. And if we can remain in that relaxed state, which is obviously part of the aim, then those things that are holding us, or unconscious kind of fears, different experiences that we might have had as children that in some way block us or lock down the prana, the vitality, they can become freed up. and no longer inhibit us in the same way. And it depends on the depth, you could say, of the experience. Some experiences, and you may not be aware even of exactly what it is. So sometimes things can arise just as a color. Sometimes it's a full memory that can come up. Sometimes it can be a body experience, because the body also holds the different experiences. So when we're working with the visualizations, part of the aim is to allow that unconscious and subconscious layer to arise. And we're the witness, in the same way that you watch that movie and you know you're not that character, you're not that experience is not happening to you, you're just watching it, and you know that Hollywood's made it. It's the same thing. We become the observer to all that inner material, and sometimes it's very obvious and sometimes it's not. But it's incredibly powerful in relation to working with disease, because the roots of the disease are hidden in those layers. And so we're starting again to weed that deep mind, to let go of some of that trauma and clean the slate, so to speak. Yeah.
And so you don't have to know it. Like it's possible that a lot of really powerful things can be released at this point, and you'll never know what it was, but the felt sense afterwards is the big happen.
Yeah. I think it's different for different people. Some people are very much aware, and it can change from Yoga Nidra to Yoga Nidra. And I mean, please note, for those people that are new to Yoga Nidra, that this isn't going to happen on day one. For most of us, when we start with Yoga Nidra, really, it's just about relaxing the nervous system. It's about ignite our immune system, that we can get the deep rest that we're often missing, that we can give ourselves a break from all the onslaught. So for the majority of people, it's not going to be on day one that deep material arises. But if you do Yoga Nidra regularly and you really work with yourself, then these things can happen. And yeah, it can be that sometimes there's awareness of what's unfolded, and there's other times where there isn't. And I don't think we need to be all the time. I don't think we need to understand it to every part of it, because there's so many experiences that we've had from the moment we are in the womb, even not even born, but in the womb, we're already getting imprints. And we can't possibly consciously, in my opinion, go through each and every experience. So some of it's just going to release in a natural way. And that's the other thing about Yoga Nidra. It's not about forcing it. We're not aiming to push anything up or pull it up. It's rather, it happens in a very natural way. So as we develop our witnessing awareness, as we get more in tune with our inner life, as we start to find and retrain ourself in the relaxation response, and really be able to access that at will, rather than it being kind of a very rare experience for many people, then those things, I think, start to arise naturally. And that's where Yoga Nidra practice, really with that dedication, can be an incredibly transformative and very powerful healing tool. Yeah.
That's sort of the trick, right? To be willing to wait. Isn't that what we're trying to teach everybody, including ourselves?
Yes.
We're in this Western medical model where you just take a pill and it's better. And this is the tricky part for me. For me in my life, it has been. And, in the teaching of this, it's like, it's not going to happen right away.
No, well, it can too, but mostly it doesn't. I think we have to have a different attitude. It's a lifetime process, not just Yoga Nidra, but yoga in itself. And this is where, like a 200-hour teacher's training, or it's just an experience. It's a personal experience. It doesn't give you the right base to start to go out and teach all these things. It's, these things are something, the practices, the techniques, the transformation that occurs is a life journey. And the more we work with ourselves, the more we can unfold, the more we let go of the defining conditioning, and the more we open to who we really are. And of course, there's a few rare people where it might happen in that click of a snap, but for the majority, it's a process. And, think of how much material we've taken in the 30, 40, 50, 60 years that we've been on the planet. There's so much that's come in, and most of it's at that unconscious, subconscious layer, which we normally only experience when we're asleep and we're not able to experience it because we're unconscious. So to kind of weed it out and to start to move into those depths of ourselves, it takes time and dedication and a willingness also to work with ourselves. But I guess the beauty of Yoga Nidra is that it has an immediate effect in the level of helping us to get the relaxation response, giving us that break, so we're much more aware of the material coming in. It trains us in the witnessing awareness over time, so we're able to approach our life in a different way. So it's not just an unconscious experience where we're going from A to B every day, not realizing how we got to A to B. But as we do Yoga Nidra, there's simultaneously the mindfulness that occurs, simultaneously the understanding that this is a process, life is a process, that our healing is a process, that the transformation is a process. And then we can start to use every experience in life. Actually, the aim is that we're bringing the qualities, the concepts of Yoga Nidra into daily life. So that witnessing that's behind all the different stages of Yoga Nidra, we bring that out so that we become more aware, we become more mindful in each and every aspect of life. The experience of being able to not be so influenced by the opposite experiences, we bring that out so that when we're in that experience and then that one, instead of reacting like we may have in the past, we learn to be in our center, because we're retraining our whole nervous system to be more in that relaxation response. And in that way, it's very important to understand that Yoga Nidra isn't just a technique. Remember, coming back to the ancient idea of it, it's a state of experience. So we're training ourselves to gradually access more and more the state of experience. And really, it's about bringing yoga off the mat and into daily life. And that's a process. Yeah, so it's a lifetime. Yeah, it's not a pill that you can just take, but by doing it, you'll have an immediate relaxation experience, most likely, for majority of people. By doing it, we'll have a break from the onslaught. By doing it, we'll connect more with our breath, which, as we spoke about, is one of the only ways we can start to turn off from the fight and flight. Yeah, by doing it regularly, we are giving ourselves some love and care. And I think many of us are good at caring for others, but not so good at caring for ourselves. So this is about really honoring ourselves and nourishing ourselves for just a little while. Yeah, I mean, how much time do we spend in the day doing so many things? Just a little bit of time for me, to nourish myself. Really important.
I often say to myself, oh, I don't have time. And I'm like, in 24 hours, I cannot afford an hour just for me.
Yeah.
That's a problem. And yes, I can.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely reprioritizing. And one of the things I've done is started to put myself in my Google Calendar, because, like everybody else, even though I live on a remote mountaintop, life is very busy and it never seems to end. So my solution is, okay, now I'm in my Google Calendar. so I get that time, which is essential. One of my clients said, he said, it's kind of like on the airplane, he's a pilot. He said, you put your own oxygen mask on before you put everybody else's on. It's like, oh yeah. So it's important to put our own oxygen mask on, and then we can be of service, whether that's at work or as a parent or in a partnership or as a yoga teacher or healthcare worker, whatever field you're operating in, it doesn't matter. It's the same concept. We'll be better at whatever we do when we've taken care of ourselves. And Yoga Nidra is a really amazing way to do that.
Yes. So I pretty much add it to everything that I do. I incorporate it in my mindfulness classes, because I think that sometimes the meditation process, at least the mindfulness meditation, is really focused on effort. And my attempt to always try to attain a state of balance, I think that effort needs to be met with an equal amount of surrender. And I don't know personally any other practice that allows me to experience that kind of surrender besides Yoga Nidra. I just don't know anything else. And certainly I'm not an adept meditator to get to those places, without it, but it's been really critical for me.
Yeah, and it really is. And just even the position in itself, laying in shavasana. And of course you can do it in other positions. And I do, for example, on the, on the plane when I travel, or if I don't have the facility to do a shavasana, then I'll find another way to do it. But when we use that posture, we're really opening ourselves. We're feeling supported by the earth beneath us. We're having less stimulation on our hands, face, feet, genitals, because they're not touching a surface, which means there's less stimulation moving to the brain. So just the posture in itself gives us that opportunity to start to surrender. And it is different. There's an effort that's required in meditation, and I think that's important practice as well. Like, I'm all for a very balanced approach to yogic practices and transformational practices, but Yoga Nidra has a special element that really does allow for one to totally surrender. And that can take time depending on the different clients and whether they're, what type of trauma might be underlying. Some people have to do it in different positions just to feel safe. But when we can start to unfurl the body and really open, something occurs at that energetic level as well, where the prana begins to flow and we get the support of the earth beneath us. So it's very powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just another quick question. For those of us who are not really at the complete transformative level and just need to rest, is it fine to do Yoga Nidra just to turn off the senses, unplug the senses, settle yourself down, and just let your nervous system come to balance?
I just missed a bit the beginning of that.
Yeah, so I'm just sort of validating or hoping to validate that using Yoga Nidra just to unplug, when that's the first thing that you can do. When you're just not at the place where you can worry about transformation, you're just exhausted.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point. I mean, so many people, we're a society that is exhausted, actually. And so, of course, the first point is we need to come back to that center. We need to give our adrenal glands a break. We need to start to recognize again what it feels like to be in a relaxation state. We need to be able to have a method of turning off from the onslaught. So I think that in this day and age, it's really a need. And if that's where people are at, then I think is a very valid use of the practice as a beginning, and certainly will be of help to create those better patterns of being and to give us the rest and restoration that's needed. But I think it's important also to realize the power of it, and I guess keep that in the realm of understanding that it's a much more transformative and powerful practice than just relaxation. That's just the beginning. And we need that. So, I honor that. We need it at this day and age. So then, yes, use it.
Yes.
But take the next step in the process when you're able to, or when people are able to. Yes.
Wow. This has been awesome. We're running out of time, and I wonder, do you feel complete? Is there something else that you'd like to add?
The last two stages, so I should probably touch on those quickly and just say that we utilize the Sanculpa a second time, and we do that at the end of Yoga Nidra also, because by that point if people have been practicing regularly, they'll often come into quite deep states of experience, and there have been some experiments in the past which show that the theta, the dream waves, as well as even the delta, the deep sleep waves, can be manifesting in the later stages of a long and deep Yoga Nidra. And so at that point, we're really deeply in contact with that unconscious and subconscious layers. So if we repeat our Sankalpa at that point, it's like watering that seed and really, really giving it more ability to manifest. And of course, whatever we focus on in life, we do manifest that. So it's important to start to really think about that and manifest the right things. And Sanculpa is a way to do that. And then the final stage is to externalize again. And I think that's important to touch on here too, because many times people do Yoga Nidra and then they have to go back out in the world. So we need our senses. They're an important, they give us information. And if we can have our awareness activated whilst getting the sense information, then we can make really conscious decisions on what we do with that information. But we do need them because we're living in a body, and they're part of the information that keeps us safe, the information that allows us to navigate the world. So in that way, we want to reconnect to our senses and make sure that we really are truly grounded back in our senses before we go out and do whatever we need to do. And the aim is, of course, to then bring that attitude, bring that harmony, bring the calm that hopefully we've created back out into whatever we're doing. And the more we practice it, the more I've experienced, I can extend the experience. And that, of course, is a practice, again, that we keep on working with. So I just wanted to touch on those last two stages because they are important in their own right for those reasons.
Yes, that is so important. Yes, I always tell people, I think of it as re-entry into the world. Like, please don't jump up, is what I say, at this, and run out of here at the same speed with which you ran in.
Yeah, exactly.
And really just take some transitional time so that you are prepared to move back onto the world, because a lot of times I find senses to be quite heightened, and it can be overwhelming to just immediately go back into the busyness of the world.
Yeah, very much. And I think, again, this is where the mindfulness training, the awareness, the witnessing is so important, because it can give us, again, that perspective to watch rather than kind of move right back into the, overstimulation.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
Good.
Well, I mean, that I have just so deeply appreciated studying with you and learning from you. And I think of you every moment that I teach Yoga Nidra, and I just am completely grateful to you.
I have to be grateful to my teachers, because I would not be here. I would not be able to do that work without having them given the understanding through the Bihar School of Yoga. And really, the tools and the depth and the way that we kind of work with the practice that's been given over many years. And so I'm honored to be able to share it.
Yes.
So thank you for receiving it with so much.
Yes, it's such a gift. It is such a gift.
Yeah,
so I know that before we go, you are offering an MP3 for folks that sign up for your email list, or we'll find it on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about what is available?
So it's a relaxation MP3 that has a few different tracks. One of the tracks is a relaxation Yoga Nidra, and health Yoga Nidra, actually, is I think what it's called, and some very restorative Hatha yoga practices that really work on nourishing the adrenal glands and helping to bring one into that relaxation state, as well as some breathing practices. And I think the Gayatri mantra is on it as well. So, and that will be available. And I really look forward to sharing that with people. It's a very beautiful practice.
Yes, thank you. I know that everybody's going to want that. And I will put your website information at Anahata on the below the video, as well as you sent me a beautiful video link of your life there, which is just lovely. And I'll include that for everyone else to see as well. It's beautiful.
Yes. You're all welcome to New Zealand. It's an amazing, amazing place to be and to learn these practices.
Indeed. And you're there, so all the more reason to go.
Yeah, and I do travel too, so maybe I'll connect with some of you around when I'm on my journeys.
Yes.
I've just come back from Norway and Sweden, which was really amazing.
And you're off now to India, right?
Yeah.
Shortly?
My annual pilgrimage, both for my own training and as well as I share some deeper courses there on chakras and prana.
Beautiful. Well, you'll have to come this way sometime again. I would love
I hope so. Yeah, I'm looking into that.
Yes.
I love that.
Well, it has again been such an honor and a pleasure to spend time with you. And I know that everybody's going to appreciate your deep and beautiful teachings. And I thank you from my heart for all that you do, to all of your teachers, to everyone who's had anything to do with bringing this beautiful practice to the world. But particularly, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Gina. Thank you for including me in this beautiful offering to people. And I think it's such important knowledge that's being shared. So I'm very honored to be a part of it.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you.
So thank you again. Thank you everybody else for watching. And we'll see you soon.